Welcome to Kojo's Math. And in a little bit, I'll explain to you where the name Kojo came from. But today, we're talking about evaluating expressions with integers. And that would be variable expressions, where we're taking and we're substituting the integers in for the variables. There's a couple things you need to remember that we've kind of talked about, we've touched on in class. The first one is, when you have -5, the integer -5, and you square it, this is different. When we have parentheses around it and we have an exponent on the outside, that's -5 squared, which means -5 times -5. We know that a negative times a negative is a positive, so that would give us positive 25. However, when we see the next one where it says, we want to read that as minus or a negative sign, but it is not. It is, how do you read this? Do you remember how to read this? That's right. The opposite of 5 squared, not -5 squared, because it's not the integer -5. The integer 5 is being squared, and it's telling you to take the opposite of 5 squared. So you say the opposite of 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25, and the opposite of that is -25, so it's -25. Here, the confusing thing here is people want to do this, the opposite of -5 squared, and they want to make this a giant plus sign. But no. You do not make that a giant plus sign, because order of operations tells you to do what first? Parentheses, exponents, and then multiplication or division. And what's really happening here is this is the opposite of -5 squared. But really, you're multiplying by a -1. So you follow order of operations, you go inside the parentheses, you say, oh, I have a -5, then I square it. -5 squared is, that's right, positive 25. And then we're saying the opposite of positive 25, or we're saying -1 times positive 25, and the answer is -25. You do not make it a giant plus just because there's a negative and a negative next to each other, like we do when we're adding and subtracting. And the reason why you don't is because there's an exponent on the outside of these parentheses. Okay. So we're going to talk about absolute value, which is a little different. Oh, that's my phone. It always rings when I'm doing a video. We'll just have to ignore it. Keep going. Just ignore the phone. No, I'll just keep going. All right, so now absolute value is a little different. This says regular. This is a regular integer, saying taking the opposite of -4. Here there's no exponent, so we can make a giant plus here, and the answer becomes 4. With absolute value, however, we cannot do that. This says take the opposite of the absolute value of -4. You can't do a giant plus with the absolute value. You have to first evaluate the absolute value before you can apply the negative. Now you're multiplying by a -1 here, but you still can't do a giant plus and cancel the negatives out because it's telling you first must take the absolute value of -4. So you bring this over, negative, and you evaluate the absolute value of -4, which is, that's right, 4. But we put it in parentheses to show that we've evaluated the absolute value of -4, and the absolute value of -4 is 4. So that becomes evaluated out of absolute value. We drop the, what are they called? What are these called? Vertical bars. We drop the vertical bars and replace them with parentheses because we've evaluated the absolute value of -4. Now we say the opposite of 4 is -4. Okay. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Now we're going to do evaluating expressions. Okay, variable expressions. So here I'm telling you that x equals -4 and y equals -3. When you do these, when you replace the variable with an integer, you put parentheses around that so you can see. Right here it's x squared. If we simply went -4 squared, you might say the opposite of 4 squared is -16. That's not what they're asking you to do. X is -4, so we put parentheses around the -4 because that's replacing the x. So therefore we know it's -4 squared. Then we subtract y squared, and y is -3, so we put parentheses around the -3 and replace the y with that. And the exponent goes on the outside, not on the inside, because it's telling you to square whatever y is. Now, we don't do a giant plus here because we have to evaluate -3 squared first. So we get 16 minus 9, and 16 minus 9 is 7. Here, this is a little complicated. I need you to make sure that you know that the number that's being multiplied by the variable is called, I told you this a while back, and you need to know it. The number that's being multiplied by the variable is called the coefficient of the term. Coefficient, and you need to know how to spell it. C-O-E-F-F-I-C-I-E-N-T. The coefficient is the number that you're multiplying by the variable. Here it's -3. -3 is the coefficient of the term, -3x squared. What's the coefficient of 4y? It's -4y. Remember, this has a dual roll, so the coefficient is -4 here. All right, so we're going to replace the x with -4 squared minus 4 times -3. We evaluate, order of operations tells us -4 squared. -4 squared is 16. You can do this. And -3 times 16 is -48. Minus 4 times -3 is -12. Now, a lot of students will drop the negative in here and just put 12 because there's a negative. No, this says minus 4 times -3. 4 times -3 is -12. We bring that -12 down. Now we can do a giant plus because there's no exponent, and -48 plus 12 is -36. Now we have m equals 2 and n equals 1. 4 minus, and we're going to replace 1 plus. Now m squared is 2. There's no negatives, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in parentheses because I like that. It's a habit. I do that all the time. So I have to evaluate inside the parentheses, and inside the parentheses is an exponent. So we have 4 minus, this is 4, 1 plus 4, which is 5. So 4 minus 5 is -1. Now we have y times the absolute value of -4x. Y is -3. We replace, we have -4, and then x is -1. So we have -3 times the absolute value of -4 times -1. Okay, so -4 times -1, we go inside the absolute value, we evaluate -4 times -1, we get 4. Well, the absolute value of 4 is, that's right, 4. And then we have -3, and we're going to take it out and show that we've evaluated the inside of the absolute value. We've dropped the vertical bars, replaced it with parentheses, so everybody knows that we're done with the absolute value. And -3 times 4 is -12. Notice how I'm showing my work. You have to, you can't do this in your head. You lose mega points on my quizzes or tests. You have to replace the variables with the numbers, and what property is that called? The substitution property of equality, because we're replacing the variable with the number that it represents. Okay, then we simplify it, we come down in a triangle form. Now, you're going to try these. I'm going to read them just so you can. So, m plus the absolute value of the opposite of n squared. M is 2 and n is -3. These are all different. The quantity of x plus 3 times the quantity of y plus 6. X is equal to -1 and y is equal to -2. N times the quantity of n minus the quantity of n plus n. Mouthful. M equals 1 and n equals -2. I want you to pause the video, do these problems, show the proper work, and when, oh yeah, I wrote it myself. And then when you're ready, start the video back. Don't rewind it, just pause the video, do these problems, and then start the video when you're ready to come back and check your answers. Welcome back. Let's see how you did. Okay, so you're just going to check your answers. If you have any problems, you come and tell me tomorrow. So on the first one, you should have gotten 11. Okay, you can pause the video and check your work to make sure you showed the proper work. On the one that's the quantity of x plus 3 times the quantity of y plus 6, the answer was 8. I know that's a really afflicted looking 8, but that's an 8. And then on the the n times the quantity of n minus the quantity of n plus n, the answer was 2. All right. Now I want you to write down 2 things. I got to get back on the camera. I want you to write down 2 things that you've learned and 1 question that you still have, and bring them to class tomorrow. And this is going to get you ready for the quiz that we've got